Hello and welcome. He's been perhaps the most controversial army man in India in many years. It's been raging for a while in media now. Now he's returned or come back with a book. It's called Courage and Conviction. My guest for today is General K Singh. General K Singh, thank you very much for speaking with us. So first question, Courage and Conviction. Does the title mean something more than what it says?
No. If you read the book, you will find that there are convictions and a conviction that one has followed, which started sometime in school, it is the way the bedrock was made. And I've always held, if you don't have convictions to stand by, you can't have the courage to defend.
Right.
So that is why courage and conviction.
And does that run in any way contrary to, let's say, the principles of serving an armed force or armed forces?
No, I don't think so. See, armed forces teach you this.
And I'm asking because, people who listen to you and watch you would want these questions answered. Yeah.
When you go into it, they teach you, this is what you should stand by. This is what the code of conduct is. This is how things are to be done. And if you have imbibed those, I'm quite sure you will stand by them. That's why. And courage stems from them. I mean, if you believe very strongly that you've got to protect the lives of your men first, you will stand by them. If you don't believe in it, you will run away.
So tell us, at what point do you feel you've sort of gone off the beaten track when it compared to, let's say, your peers in the army or your predecessors in the army? Because at some point you stood up and said, there is a problem with all this equipment in the army, most of it is junk, and therefore we need to do something urgent. No, absolutely right. But in some ways you did something that many of your predecessors don't seem to have done.
No, I think I've stayed on the path that was laid out in 1970 when I joined. And that path was very simple. You go by what the service values are. I'm from a military family. My father was in the military. My grandfather was in the military. So you understand the system and you try to follow the values that have been given to you. So you went by that. I mean, it comes out quite clearly in the book that I could have fallen anywhere en route. It's a miracle that one reached the topmost position despite having views like this, which means the system is fair, which means if you are following the values, you don't have to do anything else. So I won't comment on people before me or what happens after me. I think one should go by what one is, and if that can help some people in following on that path,
right,
so be it.
So I'll come to the individual in a moment, but do you see any change or evolution in the very role of the armed forces vis-a-vis the state or the sovereign, in the manner they are free to express certain things, in a manner that they engage with civil society?
See, when you look at the armed forces, there was a very old saying, okay, let the armed forces stay in the background. I think that was never the case. Even when you take from how we became independent, the armed forces before independence had a role, both as part of the policy making decisions, they took part in it. I think somewhere after independence there was a feeling, because of the neighborhood, because of the third world countries, to the lot in which we belonged at that time, that I hope our armed forces do not take over the country. So there was a phobia that was created, and I think remnants of that phobia remain.
Who created that phobia in your sense?
I think the phobia was created by people who were in the hierarchy at that time, people who were feeding the hierarchy at that time.
So you mean political government?
Political, bureaucratic, the way the things were, as a country, we have got no dearth of sycophants. You say something, and I say, sir, you are the one who's spoken the words of wisdom which have just come out of Brahma's mouth. And you start feeding this to people. I think this is what has happened. And as a result, the armed forces got slightly segregated. But armed forces are part of the society. The more involved they are, and let me tell you, armed forces have this beautiful thing. They imbibe, they live, they breathe the feeling that nation comes first always and every time.
Can you give me an example from another democracy where you feel the army plays the kind of role that you're referring to and it's not, or and because it was pushed aside?
You take the oldest democracy. You take US. Armed forces play the same role. They express their this thing. The system is they have their own code of conduct, but within that code of conduct, they do take part. They are. If you don't take these people into the loop, how will you take the right decision for national security?
So you feel that a lot of your outbursts and then leading to your book in small part is really a result of that?
The book is not because of this.
No, I'm saying the book is in some ways a
and there are
culmination
no
of
outbursts.
that period. Yeah.
I've only stated things at times because I felt they had to be righted. If you, who's going to put the things right? Somebody who's head of the family. And as the army, I was head of the family. And if I found something wrong, I think it was my moral duty and moral obligation to put it right, rather than brush it on the carpet and put a big smile and say everything is fine.
For a young, Indian who's wanting to get into the armed forces or enter the armed forces or Army, Navy, Air Force, now your outburst, I'm only focusing on that one particular one, which was to do with the quality of equipment, and I think because that leads to a lot of other things. In some ways, suggests that the system in itself is incapable of responding, and hence you had to move to another platform to express your views. Is that something that's encouraging for someone who wants to enter this world?
I think it is very encouraging because see, it is not that I was taking up the issue. The issues have been taken up number of times. It is just that the issue was being given a greater push. Whosoever leaked it was doing it from some ulterior purposes. Okay. I think they were looking at some advantage so that they could smear my name. But otherwise, this is a regular practice, that if you find there is something wrong, something lacking, something which you require, you do approach people, and it is an established practice. All chiefs write a letter. None of their letters got leaked.
Right. So again, and let me come back to the same thing, because this is something that could be seen and watched much later. You know, a young Indian again wanting to do something, serve the country.
Okay, I'll put it this way.
Yeah.
A young Indian wanting to join the forces, I think he should go by his motivation as to why he wants to join. If he wants to think of the country, if he wants to have a life which is not affected by external forces, if he wants to be in an organization which, like a family, supports, no other organization in this country does it. Even when I'm retired, I'm still part of the family. It doesn't happen in any other profession. You finish your job in the government, you retire, after that people just forget about you. You might be in circulation for some reason or the other, for if people want to take some advantage in 1 or 2 years, that's it. Army doesn't finish till you die. If you want an organization like that, I think you have to join the forces.
To what extent is there a conflict between this world that we see, which is increasingly porous in terms of information, social media, and the rest of it, and let's say the role and purpose of the armed forces, which have to obviously work within a certain limitation in terms of secrecy, privacy, and a certain role which is really not so much out there in the open?
See, the conflict is that you can't have armed forces talking about what they are doing day to day. I mean, armed forces cannot be in Twitter, hey, I'm going from post A to post B.
Sure.
Sorry, that cannot be done. We have seen when we allowed transparency without responsibility when Taj was attacked. What happened? So, armed forces have to follow a certain code of conduct, and that is what is followed. But otherwise, there are a lot of things in which there has to be transparency in terms of how the acquisitions take place, in terms of how the expenditures are being done. All that in any case is transparent to a certain extent, like any other government organization. So, conflict is only in security issues, and those obviously cannot be out on the social media.
So I asked you about your predecessors, but to some extent, do you think that you are an aberration in this whole space?
I don't think so. See, it is like this. It's very easy to follow a laid out path. Retire, get into the cocktail circuit, have attend parties in the evening, play golf in the morning, go and lecture somewhere if you are called. Forget about it. I consider it life of a potato, a vegetable. If for such a long time in the service of the nation you have taken from the society, I think there has to be a giving back time, and that is my philosophy. So, after retirement I have worked for motivating the youth. I have worked for taking up problems of the farmers.
And there's politics somewhere in all.
No, there is no politics so far.
Not yet, okay.
So far, there is no politics.
So last word, General, what is the one or two themes that you really like to leave your readers with, young or old?
Firstly, there is a thing that somebody has to decide in life what you want to do, in terms of what code of conduct you want to follow, and to stand by it. The other message is that a lot of problems will come your way. Life is not always a bed of roses, and a rose also has thorns. They also create their own problems. So look for those thorns, don't get deterred by them. That's the message the book leaves right through. It runs as a message that stand by your commitment, stand by your feelings, stand by your what you have undertaken. There will be forces at work which will say no, but that's okay, that's part of life. Don't change your attitude towards that.
Right, and that's a warm note to end on. Thank you very much, General Singh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.